So everything is closed there. I've got asked if everything's closed, and it is. So we're going to talk about quality of code by design. And this is going to be all code-based, nothing design-based, just code. So let's introduce me. Hi, I'm Tonya. I'm a happy-go-lucky software and electrical engineer. And what I've done for 3 decades is code and help people and solve problems. I've got about 20 plus years in building and consulting automated equipment. And actually, if you look at the picture that's behind my little overlay there, you can see a robotic cell, a bunch of robots, and a computer or cars coming down a line. That's stuff that I used to work on for the majority of my career. Those particular systems, we would do the electrical design, the programming, and then there would be a website sitting on top of all that that did all the reporting and analysis and so on. But then I found WordPress and Genesis. Yeah, I know that's a big leap from doing that to what I do now. That's a different story we'll cover some other time. And now I teach. Where can you find me at? You can find me at wpdevelopersclub.com and also on Twitter there. And then on Wednesdays, we have a podcast, which is where we do live teaching of code, which is WordPress core. We'll talk about Genesis, PHP, and all the different languages that are required to run a website. And we talk about that in detail. It's a very code-based discussion. Now, we are all software developers, right? And code is our craft. It's not just what we do. It's not a job. It's our craft. It's our art, if you will. So why should we care about the quality of our code? You know, there's a big difference in writing code that works, right, versus writing and crafting quality code that works. Let's see the difference real quick. This is cobbled together code. It works, right? But look at it. Look at the planks. That's just where you fit together little snippets that you found, and you squeeze them all together, and you end up with this thing that is a website. It's a bridge, right? And it works. But, man, do you really want to maintain that? This is a quality crafted, well-crafted example of what a bridge would be, obviously, but also a website. You can see the quality, the planning that's gone into that. And that's something you would step out on, feel safe, and be able to maintain. So let's talk about the whys. Why should I care about the quality of code? It makes your code and your projects more predictable. You get more predictable results and behaviors. It's easier to maintain. It's easier to edit and extend, so when that customer says, hey, I need you to do this, you don't go, oh man, I hate to touch that again because I break it every time I touch it, right? It's easier to test, and it elevates your craft, right? It maximizes your fun factor. Come on, what we do for a living, it should be fun. Every time you touch that code, you should be having fun. But what it really gets down to for you, yeah, these are all nice fluffy things, is you want more respect, you want more recognition, and you want more money, right? That's what it comes down to. We want to get paid to do what we do. The how. Let's talk about code smells. Yeah, if you're coding any of these, you might be smelly. So let's talk about what they are. These are true indicators of looking at, oh, crud, I might have a code or a quality issue in my code, and what should I do about that? Planning out your project. All right, so a lot of folks will just start writing code, and they don't have a written project plan. They don't have a map, a spec. They just start writing. Let me give you a story here real quick. I was hired many moons ago to be an engineering manager and come into this company that had a lot of problems with all their engineers were living on the road. They were writing code on the road. On the road. These machines had shipped. They're in the manufacturing facility, and they're sitting there writing the code. It's not working yet. They're living on the road. That's not right. That's not how you do things. What ended up happening was things broke. They didn't run correctly. They had a lot of maintenance issues. They didn't produce to the quality of what it needed to be, so the end product suffered. And we had people living on the road. The other problem was it cost sometimes a factor of 10 or more in the budget, so that was a problem too. So what I always tell people is never, ever, ever write a single line of code without some sort of written spec, map, or plan. And that can be very simple, depending upon the size of your project. A bigger project's going to need a full spec. A smaller project can just be a mind map that you sit in, okay, it's going to do this, and maybe a hand-drawn piece of paper where you're mocking up what screens are going to look like, and these are how things are going to talk to each other, and so on. And that's what a spec does. It's telling you this is how you're going to write your code and how you're going to organize it. Okay? Why? So you don't end up with this versus that. Everything starts with the plan. We plan it out. We know what we're doing. Now we can go in and start working on our project. So let's make a pledge to one another right now, because everything starts right here. I, Tonya, insert your name, do pledge to never ever write a single line of code until I have a plan. Stick that on a sticky somewhere in your office, on your computer. Put it right in front of you so that you know, oh, crud, I started writing code and I didn't have a plan. Even proof of concepts, which all of us do because we're not quite sure if that thing is going to work, still needs a plan. What is the proof? What are we going to put into it? So on and so forth. Okay, let's move on. Here's another smelly. Let's meet the all-in-one child theme. It does everything. Oh, we've all seen these, right? It even includes the kitchen sink. All right. So here's what it looks like. It's got a child theme, and in that child theme, it has the theme code. That's good. Oh, it's got shortcodes. Oh, it's got widgets. Oh, it's got admin settings pages. It's got, oh, portfolio. Oh, no, that's a custom post type. Oh, it's got another one, FAQs. It's got some custom fields, some meta boxes, maybe some custom taxonomy. Yep, there's that taxonomy. No, we don't want to do that. That project's kind of smelly. So, problems with the all-in-one theme are you change the theme and all that functionality is gone, right? They sat there, they configured up, in their pages and their posts, they used all those shortcodes, and they're still in there, so now their theme goes away, and it's broken. None of that stuff works anymore. All those custom post types where they spent time and populated those, they're gone. It's all gone. Code is repeated over and over and over and over. That's bad. It's not reusable without making edits. That's also bad. We want our code because we want to save time, we want more money, we want to spend less time. Our code needs to be reusable so we can just plunk it in. I want to pull in this, I want to pull in that. I don't want to make edits to it. And off we go. It's hard to maintain because everything's in there. And it's hard to modify and extend. So the quality code, that quality project starting lineup is going to look like this, okay? And here's some rules of thumb. Themes are for presentation, folks. That's it. Plugins are for all of your functionality. Don't intermingle, and we're going to talk a lot about intermingling. Yeah, you can do it, but, you know, it's really not a smart idea, and we'll talk about why. Never, ever, 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 ever repeat. Organize by purpose. By purpose. So everything within a file, everything within a function has to support that purpose. If you organize that way, it becomes so easy to organize things in modules and submodules, and now you can plunk that out and put it into another project. It's easy to find, it makes sense to you, and so on. Functions should have one single task. They do one thingy. That's it, and they do it well. And if you refactor down to that premise, you also get skinny code, and that's a good indicator that, oh, you're on the right track. All of these support some very well proven software principles. They're well used out in the industry. I'm not the first to say them. Dry is one. Separation of concerns is another. Single responsibility principles another, and there's many more. So let's meet our players, shall we? Say hello to the theme core plugin. What goes in this core plugin? And every theme that you do should have one of these. There should be core functionality. It can have base classes so that you're not repeating. Things like widgets can have a base class, and then you extend off of that so that you're not repeating code over and over and over again. Have your short codes. It can have some widgets in it. It can have your admin settings. And there's an example of one if you want to look on GitHub. Actually, all the code that runs the club is on GitHub, and it's all free and available to you. Just go ahead and pull it up. Now, it is all in OOP, so it may be a little confusing to you if you're not familiar with OOP. All right, so another player that you may not be used to, say hello to the config file. All right, if you come from other languages, we load in configurations with multiple different ways, whether it's an INI file or there may be some other ways that we load in configurations. And configurations are the starting point. It's where everything starts before you begin your work. So when I load something into a function, I like that function to be able to start working right away. Mostly if I'm working in OOP too. I don't like to spend a lot of time going off and assembling what I need. I just need to get going. By putting things into a config file, what you get is modules and submodules that are able to then start working. You've also abstracted all that stuff away, and you've put it somewhere where now it makes sense. Okay, I need to change things. My code doesn't change, my config files change. And you'll see examples of this as we go through, so it makes kind of sense to me. Okay, yeah, every project I go in and I'm changing these things, those go great in a config file, and now my functionality code doesn't need to change. It just pulls in that config file and boop, off it goes. Huh? Why load a config file? I kind of talked about it there, that it makes things reusable. And that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to get down to the point where your code is reusable over and over and over. You can just pull it in. It's not snippets anymore. It's modules and submodules packaged up into code. So I need to bring in some widgets. Boop, here I go. I can pull that in, and now I have my widgets. I need custom post types. I have that class. I can pull it in, and just by loading in a config file, I can make it anything that I want it to be. It can be a portfolio, it can be an FAQ, it can be an events, whatever it needs to be, it can be that with one file. So what you want to do is think ahead and think modular when you're coding. Think about how you can save yourself time. If I code it now and I code it in quality, I can reuse it. Okay, so what goes into a config file? Your sidebar configuration. If you have a bunch of image sizes, you notice that you're repeating that over and over again. Add image size, add image size, add image size. All that can be pulled in, and now you can loop through them. Add theme support. So all those theme supports can all be put into a config file, loaded in, loop through them. Shortcode defaults. Boy, that makes when you look at a shortcode, a big chunk of it is all the defaults. And then you put it into your ats, and now you can start to do something, right? Abstract that away, and you can work on just getting down to what that shortcode does. Widgets, the defaults, the widget underscore ops, the control ops, all that stuff can be abstracted away. Here's a big one too. Registering of your post types for custom post types, and same with taxonomies, same thing. So everything that configures, sets a default state, or sets a starting point is a good candidate for abstracting it away into a config file. So let's look at what this refactored project now looks like. Before it was the all-in-one theme. Whew. Okay, so I got a core plugin. Yup. There's my themes presentational functional code just to support the theme presenting the screens. There's my portfolio plugin. Now it's not intermingled into the child theme. Here's an FAQ plugin. And you notice that everything is pulling off of core. Okay. Core is the nucleus, which then sits on top of Genesis, and Genesis sits on top of WordPress. So with the core plugin, everything can work off of that. It's the center. And then all of these things, which are your HTML, your JavaScript, your CSS, your config, all set off to the side, and they are put into each of their plugins or the child theme, respectively. So the child theme has its views, its scripts, and so do the plugins, and so do the FAQ. Now, one caveat to that. I'm not a real big fan of putting CSS into plugins. I think that's the job of the child theme. Presentation is the job of the child theme. Okay. Another code smelly is wet. We enjoy typing. Yep, let's look at this pattern. Meet the repeaty developer. You've probably seen this one a lot, huh? I've got 4 different sidebars, and I'm going to call this code 4 times, right? And all of these could easily be abstracted off into a config file, and then I would loop through that configuration and call that code. So I'm registering, I'm passing in the config file, and then I'm looping through everything that's in that array, and I'm registering. See how much smaller that code is? Easier to look at? And the config file loads in. So when I call this, I load the config file, and boop, there you go. And this is what the config file might look like. I pull them in and I include out of the config, so this would be sidebars.php. You can also do it, wrap it in a function, and then call it if you'd rather do that. It's up to you how you want to do it, but basically it's abstracted away and it's stored in the config folder so that it makes sense. Here's some more repeating patterns. Look at this. I know that's a little small, but if you can squint your eyes and take a look, you see I'm registering 2 different post types, the portfolio and the FAQ. So these are custom post types. But I'm repeating that code twice when I could just be abstracting away the configuration for that, putting it as a key, as portfolio. Here's that one, here's FAQ, there's that one, and those are my keys, and then I can pull it in. Now I can loop through it, and boom. I have it the same way before, but with less code in the functional code itself. So here's what it looks like. And you can see I've loaded in the config file, and now I'm just looping through. And look how skinny that is. Oh, it's so much easier to look at. And now that code doesn't need to change. What changes is my config file, and that we know config files change, and that's where you'll do your editing at. So this just became modular, dry, and usable, or reusable. Hey, cool. So Remember the days when the kids would be up at the board writing over and over again? I will not. Well, in this case, it's I will not repeat myself. I will not repeat myself. I will not repeat myself. That's the drive principle. Hello. I think you got it. Here's another one. I like doing too much. Meet Mr. Multitasker. This is when you're trying to do too much in one function, one class, one file, whatever. You're trying to do too many things. Remember, functions and methods should do what? One thing. Just one thing. So here's the overachiever pattern. Some folks who have been joined in on my podcast have seen this before. But basically, this is hooked into the filter that is post_class. That's a filter that where we're adding classes to the post. And let's say that this is, there's a callback that's wired up to that particular filter event, and it's calling this class. And it's saying, here are the classes, which that's the first array that gets passed from the filter. And then I'm saying I want this number of columns, and with a default of 2. Now here's all the code that then would do that. I would go through and I have a switch, which is a decision tree, and I say, okay, if I'm set to 6, I want 1/6. If I'm set to 4, I want 1/4, blah, blah, blah. The next one, which is off on the bottom right, sorry, I couldn't squeeze everything in line, says if this is the first column in a row, then also give me the first styling class, and then we're going to return everything, right? So let's see what we got here. I just went through. I am looking, the number 1 there is I'm making decisions, so I'm checking state. Number 2 is I have a big old decision tree. Number 3 is, I'm also checking to see if this is the first column, and then I am assigning all of that into the classes array, and then I'm returning the classes. I'm doing 4 different things there. So let's look at how we can get rid of that and refactor it. All right, so if we abstract away the column styling classes, so that decision tree there, what are we going to do with that? Let's abstract that into a function called get_column classes. And then by using an indexed array, you can see column classes is an array. An indexed array start at what position? 0. So if I'm requesting number of columns 0, then I'm going to get nothing. If I'm requesting an index of 1 column, I'm going to get nothing. There's no reason to put it into a grid, right? If I want 2, I get a 1/2. If I want 3, I get a 1/3, so on and so on and so on. And then I go down and I check, was my number of columns equal to or less than 6? If yes, then I'm going to pull that out, and I'm going to return it. And if no, then you just get an empty string. So I just refactored that down. You can also, if you want to go one more step, here's another good candidate of pulling those column classes off into a configuration file. Excuse me while I get a drink of water. And if we come back and we look at that function, notice that the decision tree and checking of the state of number of columns is all gone now. What I did was I'm now calling get_column_class, and I'm passing through how many number of columns do I want. I'm assigning it into a variable. I'm checking to make sure that variable has something. It's not empty, and if it is, let's get out of there. We're going to bail out and just send back your classes. And if it's not, we're going to assign. So now that is just responsible for assigning the class. The other one is responsible for looking up what class you want and returning it. So it's getting. All right. Let's take care of the first column and abstract that away. And so now we create another function called get_first column styling class, and we pass in the number of columns, and we go and we just pull that code right in and we return it. Pretty simple. But now that becomes very reusable. And then I go and I put that back in to my original code. And you can see I kind of blew it up there so you can see it. Well, basically, I assigned it to a first, and if I did get a first, then I assigned it to the classes as another element in the array, and then I return classes. Do you see an opportunity now to refactor some more? Nod your head yes. I can see you. Nod yes. All right, we've got to get it down to one thing, right? That's our goal. Functions are one thing. Okay, so this is the class or the function I just showed you. And you notice now it's got an X on it because we want to refactor it some more. And here's what we can do. So we've got the same thing, but look at it. How much code we just cut out of there. So I'm still getting the column classes function. And then I'm going and getting the first. And then all I did was put that all in line as a ternary operator. And I'm returning an array now to the caller that's calling and executing this class. So if there is a first that's been passed to me, then I stick that into the array along with the column class. If there's not, all you get is an array that has the column class in it. So that's much more refactored down now. Now, I just said, what's the single purpose of this one? It's just getting the grid classes and returning them to you. That's what it does. That's it. It has one responsibility now. Okay, that makes sense. So let's look at the complete refactored code. So we have our filter, which is post_class, and then we're calling our callback, and then we're going off and we're asking for the classes for the grid pattern. And in this case, I'm saying I want 2, and again, that right there that 2 could also be something that you want to put in a config file and then pull it in by the type that you're using, or maybe you're just putting this code right now into a template right within your child theme. So let's say the home page wants 2, another page wants 3, and so on. You can take care of that. And that gets refactored down, and you can see the supporting code that's below it, which we've already discussed. Nice and simple, right? Everything pulls. We got rid of that big decision tree. We compressed everything down. Now it's refactored. It's easier. Everything is now maintainable. What do you think? All right. Some other ways of refactoring decision trees. You can go in and actually set a variable for the function name. And I do this all the time. I do it with classes too. So I would say, for example, let's say I have a field that I'm dealing with. I work in gravity forms a lot. But basically I would have an array that has a key by my type, field type, and then after that, the value of that is the actual function name. So I can assign that to a variable, and then I can call a function name and pass off the variable field to it. That's one way of doing it with a variable function. Another way is using the PHP built-ins, which are call userfunc and call userfunc array. That's another way of doing it. And you see that a lot in core. Actually, that's how events work. And events are hooks, which are your filters and your actions. All right, let's move on. Views are for HTML. This is where I was talking about, we were going to talk about intermingling. I'm not a fan of intermingling HTML or JavaScript or CSS into your functional code. Now, your view will have some PHP in it, it's got to, but I don't like that I see a lot of HTML intermingled in with my functional code, and you'll see that in some shortcodes and some widgets. By abstracting that off into a view, it now has a single purpose. I am a view. I'm used for presentation. The other code is used for supplying all of the functions that I need, the values that I need, that I'm going to then populate into that presentation. So I'm separation of concerns. I'm ripping those apart, and I'm saying you do this and you do that. And so to do that, what we have to do is include a view file And that's what I'm doing here. You can see it. I'm saying, okay, here's my super duper widget, and this is where my view file is going to be, and I'm just going to include that, and boom, off I go. And that child underscore directory, if you caught that, and Gary's probably sitting there going, hey, you don't want to do that. That's supposed to be off in a plugin, right? So yeah, that wouldn't be there. That would actually be the path to your plugins view folder. All right. So what are the benefits? Well, you get well-organized code. You get it where it's focused and purposeful. It's modular. It's more maintainable. All the changes occur in one spot. It's much easier to test. It's skinny. Skinny is a great predictor of if you're on the right track or not. And like I said before, it's much more predictable in its behavior. And that's important. We don't want to be guessing at, oh, crud, there's a little bug. No, we want to know what it's doing. Here's another smelly. Guess what I do? Meet Mr. Guest. We're going to talk about purposeful naming. So if we look at this function right here, what is it doing? It just says do classes. And then there's a argument in there that's called num. What's that? What is it? What's it doing? It requires that I write a lot of comments. And if you see a lot of comments in your code, that's a clue to you that you're probably not purposely naming what's going on, and or you've got a problem in there. So let's refactor that. Let's give it a real name. So do classes becomes what it is. Get classes for grid pattern. Classes can become post underscore classes if we want to go that far. And num becomes number of columns. That makes sense to me now. Now I don't need extra comments to tell me what num is. So the guideline here is functions, methods, classes. You want to name them by what they do. Variables, you want to name them by what data they represent. Very simple. Two different things. And if you follow that, all of a sudden your code starts being self-documenting and it makes sense to you. It also makes sure that you're staying focused on what it's supposed to be doing. So let your code tell what it's doing. It makes it more readable. It's self-documenting. It promotes skinny functions and methods because now you're focused. And it defines the purpose to ensure the code supports the parent being the file. What's in that file? What's in that class? It makes sure that everything supports it. It gets rid of all that documentation, that all those comments you're writing in your code. Let's see if we got enough time. Yeah, we got some more time. So let's do another exercise in refactoring. Okay, so I have shortcodes. And you guys see this a lot. We all do this. There are defaults. Yeah? Defaults that then will be set and run through with the ats that get passed in. And just looking at this, it's not a big deal. But when you have a long list, you should see some of mine. They're long. There's a lot of ats that can be passed through. We want to abstract that away. Put it into a config file. It's the thing that can change. Yeah. So abstract that away. And this is how you can, now if you're working in functional programming, which means you're just working with functions, you're not working with OOP, it's a little bit more challenging, but it can still be done. So here's what you would do. And I hope that you can see this. Let's start at the top left. There are my two really cool shortcodes, right? I got my cool shortcode and I got my other cool shortcode. How's that for not purposely naming? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to call my cool shortcode plugin where I'm going to get the shortcode ats and I'm going to pass in the name of the shortcode, which is now a key, and I'm going to pass it the ats. Good. Now the ats, if we look on the top right-hand side, is being passed by reference. So I don't need to then reassign it because I'm changing it. So I like passing by reference when I'm changing something. And basically what it's going to do now is it's going to parse the args. It's going to go and ask for that configuration file by that key and pass it through the ones that get for every single one of our shortcodes, which is after and before. You may even have class in there, and if you do, put that in that list so that you don't have to repeat it in your configuration. So let's look at get underscore shortcode underscore function. That's in the bottom left. And what that does is we have a static called config. And if that's empty, we're going to pull it from our configuration. And those would be shortcodes.php. And it pulls an array of those with the keys being the shortcode in this case. Maybe you would rather use a function in your config. Me, I just return an array and pull out what I want. And then I'm going to check to make sure that config key is in that array. And if it is, I'm going to return it. And if it's not, I throw an error because you shouldn't be calling that darn thing if you've got the wrong key. That gives you a clue when you're developing. Oops, I made a boo-boo. So that's my configuration file, the shortcodes.php, and it's stored in the config folder. All right, so that gets passed through with parse args. If we go back up to the top right, it gets set to defaults, and then defaults, just like we saw before, and we always see in our shortcodes, then passes through shortcode underscore ats, and back reassigned again to the ats variable. Since it's passed by reference, I'm automatically seeing it back in my shortcode function. So I've abstracted all that away. Those two functions that are in the top right and the bottom left are now reusable for every single project that I work on. I don't have to change that anymore. Cool. Let's move on. Here is what it looks like in OOP, because some people always ask me, and matter of fact, I was asked to do this talk on OOP, but a lot of folks are not ready for that, so I wanted to opt for this one instead, but curiosity gets the best of people, so let's show it in OOP. Here we go. I namespace everything. So at the very top, you see there's a namespace. There's an abstract class, and it implements a contract, which is an interface. It has a couple of, oh, by the way, before I go on, you notice none of my code has comments in it, and my code normally would. I did that because we only have a certain amount of screen space, so I got rid of those comments. Anyway, when I call and instantiate this object, which will be a shortcode, I pass in, what do I pass in? The configuration for this. Let it start at a known state. Don't make it go off and ask for it. Send it in. And then I'm going to init that and store it away to where I need it to be. And then the rest of the code, you can see I do my shortcode. I will merge that in, and that looks the same as before. Excuse me. And then I'm going to render. When I render, I'm calling a view file. Now, when I abstract this, when I'm going to use it with a class, I'll have another function in here that's actually doing some work, and that's the do shortcode. And you can see that there is a do functional work. That is an abstract function, and that's where you'd put your code in. Cool. So, super sniffer clues. You got to develop a good super sniffer when you're writing code so you can find all these smellies. You don't want to be smelly. Anything that's long, a long function, a really long class, long methods, if they're focused, they have one purpose, that's it, they're skinny. We want skinny. Vague naming, that's another clue. Decision trees, yeah, multi-long decision trees, which would be like selects and ifs, or switches and ifs, sorry about that. So any of those are great clues that, oh, crud, maybe I should be calling functions here instead. Yeah, you should. Abstract that away. Asking first. What that means is everything should start at a known state. Like I showed you in the OOP example in the last slide, I pass in that configuration, and I'm ready to start working right now. Ooh, yeah, let's go. But if I don't, and I say, oh, well, I have to wait, I got to go and get the configuration, and then I can start working. Yeah, that's a clue. Our classes should tell, not ask. A lot of comments. I should have put that on here too as bullet point number 5. If you're really commenting the crud out of your code, that's another clue that you might be smelly. All right, here's some more information for you. I wrote up a lot of keys to writing quality code, and you can find that here at this link on the club's website. There's also the Software Development Core Principles, which is another page on the website. And then you can join me on Wednesdays for Know the Code Show. We do post, if you're a member of the club, we post a code challenge. So we ask you to do some stuff. That's the best way to learn. Do it first. And then I go through it in detail. And since it's live, I answer all your questions too if you're a member. If you're not a member, you can always watch afterwards. And there is a full write-up tutorial on every single one that I do with all the code and so on. So it's all there for you and ready to go. Great. I thank you for everything. Let's see if there's any questions. Back to you, Marjorie.
All right. Thank you. Is it coming back to me? Do I have to? Okay. Wow. Thanks. That was great. Do we have any questions? Is that something I need to
I don't see any listed there.
Type them in the sidebar if you got any peeps. Well, thank you to Tonya, and definitely check out her site, the wpdevelopersclub.com, and there's a Slack group and all kinds of cool stuff. So we are going to wrap it up. Thank you to everyone.
Thank you, everybody.